All right, everyone. Hello. Today is our first day of book club. It is, let's see, Sunday, September 10th. And looks like we have some people that are still joining. So as people are joining, we have our chat on. We have people from Germany, UK, Colorado, San Diego, London. So awesome to see you all here. Um, so my name is Betsy Jensen, and I wanted to do this book club. Like my main purpose of each of our book club events, our sessions would be to go through the couple of chapters that are assigned or that we're going over, 1 and 2 today, and basically give the key concepts. So even if you haven't read it, you'll actually, get at least what I think are the key concepts from those 2 chapters, and then have some time for chat, questions, maybe some live stuff, for someone who wants to come on. So no pressure though. No one's going to get called out. You can always be camera off if you like. And let's see, someone is joining from Italy. Oh, fun. Alabama, Michigan, Florida. Okay, cool. All right, you guys. Well, welcome everyone. I'm in Utah, so it's like 8 a.m. And I was thinking, oh, that shouldn't be too early on a Sunday, but definitely feeling early. I'm gonna take a nap later. But I'm excited to join you guys. And I think most of the people have joined, and something in German in the chat. So I'll just kind of be keeping an eye on the chat as we go. And we'll just get started with chapter 1 and 2. So the way out, I just have to say, I love this book for the kind of most concise explanation. As you can tell, it's like easy to read. There's some humor, and it's based on the most recent research. So some of the older ones like Sarno, he was speculating with a lot of things, and he was on point with a lot of things, but not exactly everything. So this is based on current research. As you see, there's research cited along the way. And so whenever I have someone who is new to this, sometimes I have like a little article that I send them that's a summary of this book, just a real easy 1-page article. Or I say, get this book, listen to Audible. Someone says, I have the audio version and love listening to Alan's voice. Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, little plug for the book. Obviously, you probably are fans if you're here, but I have to say, like, when people ask, like, I coach on pain, and I haven't read all of the pain books because I don't really want to muddle up my thinking with a lot of different theories, because I just think PRT, the way that Alan describes it, Dr. Schubiner, it it's effective. It helps so many people. It's, simple in a sense. And it, is more effective than I think, there are merits in a lot of different things, but anyway, that's what I like is this approach with Curable, The Way Out, Dr. Schubiner, Alan Gordon. Anyway, that resonates with me. So let's get on to chapter 1. Basically, I think of chapter 1 as they're talking about how chronic pain is different than acute pain, or just like if you'd had an injury, spraining your ankle, that kind of pain, versus if it's lasted longer than 3 to 6 months. The reason they say 3 to 6 months is that most injuries heal within like 6 to 12 weeks, even a broken bone. So that's about 3 months. So saying 6 months is pretty generous. And then they've actually found from fMRI, as they talk about in the book, that when it lasts longer than that, it becomes this habit of the brain. And it's actually in a different place of the brain when they do an fMRI. So when pain becomes chronic, it's processed differently in the brain. All pain is created in the brain. That's a statement all on its own that, is revolutionary and not everyone knows, but all pain, it's, filtered up, all of the signals come up to the brain interprets it, and then when pain has lasted for a longer time, it actually switches more to the area of the brain that is involved in memory and, oh, where did I write it down? That's funny. I'm not remembering it, the memory one. I think memory and, oh, I have my notes here. Oh, it's in chapter 2, learning and memory. Okay, so we learn pain when it becomes neuroplastic, and neurons that wire together, fire together, wire together. No, I said it wrong. Wire together, fire together. I said it right the first time. And basically this habit becomes what the brain is used to. And the good news about that is we don't have to change the structures. We don't have to change the herniated discs or the scoliosis. We can change the habit of the brain and rewire the pain. Okay, any like comments or questions on that? I actually can't see all of you on the screen, but I can see if people are going to raise their hand or if you want to just say anything in the chat. Hey, Scotty. So I want this to be as interactive as possible. I could always just talk the whole time. But these are some pretty big concepts, right? All pain is created in the brain. I never knew that. I was trained as a physical therapist 20 years ago, and they didn't teach me that. So all pain is real pain too. Do you remember him talking about that? Whether we call it neuroplastic, whether we call it structural, chronic, anything like that, it's all real pain. And he even cites a research study with hypnosis, where hypnosis, not a real trigger to a tissue or injury, can cause pain. And they look at the brain and how it reacts. So the other main concept that they talk about here is that now that they've studied pain-free people, they have a lot more information about what is actually causing pain or not. And then, oh yeah, Karen says, all pain is real pain was a rather reassuring concept for me. Like, definitely, right? Because they don't talk about this in the book, but when people say pain is all in your head, they hear that pain is created in the brain and they think, oh, it's not structural, it's all in your head. It doesn't even really make sense because that's still saying the mind and body are separate. So all pain is real pain. No one's making up pain here. It's not all in your head like you're imagining it. But literally, even if you cut your finger, the brain would interpret the information from the tissue and send the pain signals. So all pain is created in the brain. Okay, we have a hand up. Shani, let's go to you. Hi.
Yes. Hello. My name is Shani. Thank you, Betsy, for creating this book club. I have a question. My question is, would processing my grief around how the chronic pain manifested and how it's impacted my life since 2019, would it help with the healing process? Because even though I know all the facts, I haven't read the book fully yet. I've read the first 2 chapters and it's given me hope, but I've noticed over the past 4 or 5 months a lot of unresolved anger, hatred, just hatred towards the pain and the body.
Yeah.
And just grief about that I really didn't let myself process in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Can that help me in my recovery or healing from chronic pain?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the main thing is he talks about it in the next chapter, in chapter 2, just at the very end, and we get into it more in the rest of the book, but that it's really any of the emotions of fear that drive pain. So when pain comes, it depends on how we react to it. And if it's a fear-based emotion, then it will amplify and create more pain, basically. So any of those, emotions that are very, something like grief. I could call it like a low vibration emotion, if that makes sense to you guys, but like a survival state. So any of the survival state emotions, they're fear-based. And so processing them is what's really interesting, is that processing pain and processing emotions can be very similar. So there are ways you can think about things differently, but there are just ways of reacting differently, like through somatic tracking. We haven't gotten to that yet in the book, but somatic tracking, you might already know from this work, is to just go into describing the shape, the color, the texture, the temperature of the pain or sensation. And you can do that for emotions as well. There are different ways of processing emotions, but I also don't want people to think that because they've had a lot of, things in their past and in their life, that it's going to be like, I have to resolve all of the emotional things before I'll get out of pain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, makes sense.
So,
I just,
yeah.
yeah, sorry. No, I just asked because I've been doing somatic tracking almost every day for a few months now, but still
Mm,
there's a lot of unprocessed
mm,
grief coming up, I guess. So I
yeah.
guess my,
Okay. Yeah.
if because I have a fear of feeling the emotions, and when I
Mm,
do let myself feel the grief, the flare up becomes intense. So
uh,
that's why I asked.
yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Pain and emotions are processed in the same area of the brain. And what they're saying in chapter 2, the main part of chapter 2, is that pain is a danger signal. And sometimes those signals can get misinterpreted, they can get crossed. So just realizing that, yeah, if you've been doing more of the somatic tracking, and you're finding there's other areas that are coming to your attention, you can focus on those. And definitely emotional processing is part of this, because our emotions, if we're resisting them, that is like a danger signal to the nervous system, right? So yeah, definitely, if you haven't already, it might be helpful to reach out to someone who does that work, coaches who help. There's, the Pain Reprocessing Center, um, and, Alan Gordon's group. And there's a lot of coaches out there. I'm one, obviously. But if you're struggling with like processing emotions and finding it really hard, it's definitely easier to do with someone who's trained to help you with that at first. And then, that can be easier. Okay, so look up Benji Scherer, Feeling for Shadow Work, amazing. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different like rabbit holes you can go down and different variances, but PRT, like I said, it's pretty clear cut and pretty simple. Like the people in the Boulder back pain study, they had 8 treatments. So they weren't getting into like years and years of processing emotions and things like that. So that's great news. And I think it was, let's see, in the Boulder back pain study, was it 99% had a change? Oh, 98% improved. So 98% of the people improved in the Boulder back pain study. And then 66% of them, so like 2/3 of them, became pain-free or nearly pain-free, which is an average 0 to 1 out of 10. So that's pretty amazing, that they were able to do that much, that much change in that short of time. So yeah, pretty amazing. And definitely the emotional processing is part of what they did. Okay. And then I'm just looking at the chat here. I think when trying to explain the client and family, to my clients and family, the concept of all pain being real, but not having to be so impactful, the hardest one is for them to get, that it's all in your head. Yeah. So I'm just kind of skimming through this. Yeah. And the way out was a light bulb moment and maybe Alan's humor. Yeah, I love that. So definitely being able to look at it this way, it's not easily accepted by everyone, but I think we're definitely seeing a shift. And as they said, over the last 10 years, things have really changed with pain science. They're actually training physical therapists differently now. They call it central sensitization instead of neuroplastic pain, but they are talking about how chronic pain is different and needs to be treated differently. So let's talk a little bit about the studies that they did and whiplash, right? So these are some good examples of how the brain can create pain when it is like stressed or expecting something. So basically, they found that in Lithuania, people don't have whiplash because they don't have the care for it. This is what I learned from Dr. Schubner's Unlearn Your Pain. They don't have, like a lot of treatment for people to have whiplash, neck therapy for years, and people don't develop it there. And then they did this placebo car crash study where they simulated a crash, but the car was never actually impacted. So there was no injury to people's tissue, but 20% of the people developed whiplash. And then 4 weeks later, 10% of the people still had whiplash symptoms, and they were never even in an accident, right? So they found actually that those people were the people with the most stress and emotional distress in the time of that incident. So basically, they were already stretched thin with their nervous system, right? They were stressed or emotionally distressed. They had that incident and their brain created pain, and then it became chronic pain from that. Okay. So, Yoshin, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I was just I'm looking to see Miss. Yes, there I am. Yeah, I actually had a whiplash patient a few weeks ago,
Oh, uh-huh.
and she had neck pain for I think a year or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her exactly this story because
Mm-hmm.
it's in the book.
Yes.
And I saw her twice after it, and she was almost out of any
Yeah.
symptoms. So
Yes.
it's and
Love
I
that.
also just commented on the easy words they use in the book, and I also it really resonates for me. I like to
Yeah.
talk normal language to people. I'm an occupational therapist, by the way,
Mm.
and I don't like to talk medical terms and just use normal words that everyone just understands. And that's really what I like about POT.
Yes.
And this woman actually was she was not very intellectual, if I may say that. And I maybe thought in the beginning, maybe this just is too complicated for her somehow. Was a
Yeah.
bit of I call that, yeah, a feeling that I had. And
Yeah.
then it's, I first explained it to her. The next time I went, also her husband was in the session,
Yeah.
and he also, yeah, did some good additions to it and on the story. And it just, yeah, also for her, it just worked. She just understood how it worked, and that yeah,
Yeah.
it can work differently. And so there was another
Love that.
amazing, yeah, evidence
Yeah.
that it's work. And I'm not so long in this work, so for me, every success story is
Yay.
another, yeah, evidence for me. This is just a great work. So great story.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That is so amazing. And it just goes to show when we have a different framework, when we can see things differently, like Dr. Schubner calls it unlearning your pain, right? Like we're telling a different story, and that education piece is really big. So that's what's nice about The Way Out is it goes through that education piece. If any of you are wanting more of that part of it, the Curable app is super helpful as well. They just have a lot of research. Dr. Schubner's Unlearn Your Pain has a ton of just research, research, research. So sometimes your brain just needs that, right? You just need to have that like validation of like, okay, this isn't dangerous. Because that's the main thing. When we fear it, when we think it's dangerous, our brain produces pain. When we can tell a different story that these are normal abnormalities, most people my age have a herniated disc or a bulging disc, and they're pain-free people that don't have chronic pain. So when we are able to see, one of my favorite things too, and then we'll get to more of the questions, is that one of the examples was this woman who had over 70 degrees, 73 degrees of scoliosis. So her back was shaped like an S, and with pain reprocessing therapy became chronic pain free and didn't have to work on stretching or getting her back in perfect alignment in order to be pain free. So this is pretty phenomenal stuff, because a lot of us had that model of like, okay, let's find the imperfection and then fix it. Definitely as a physical therapist, that's most of what I did. I was like, is there a weakness? Is there a tightness? Is there an asymmetry? Like, find all those things, do the exercises to fix them. And I think it, helps for certain kinds of pain, as they talk about in chapter 1. But when pain becomes chronic, it's more about decreasing the fear that you're doing damage, or that there's actually a problem, or, that there's anything to worry about, basically becoming more and more neutral, telling a different story. And then your brain produces it less and less. Oh, and then so Andrea's like, hey, how do you directly talk to the brain, the 22 regions that decrease pain, or the anterior insula, and tell it not to send pain signals anymore? Yeah, that's exactly what PRT teaches. Talking to the brain can look different, like you could say certain things to it, but it's really not about what you say to it. It's more about how you feel. So there are times that going into the sensation can be neutral and soothing, or there are times that distracting actually can be better because you want to get into a better feeling place, even if it's putting a heating pad on or something, or laying down, or watching a show, rather than, well, we'll get into all of this later with the PRT techniques, but basically this is what PRT is. It's talking to the brain, training the brain, rewiring the brain. And we can do this at, real time when we're doing things like somatic tracking and responding differently to it. And that's how we do it. It's over time. And it's either like, maybe you need to work a little more on the belief part, and they do have some questions that you can ask yourself to know, is it, most likely neuroplastic pain? And this is on page 29. Have the medical treatments been ineffective or just given you temporary relief? Did the pain come on during a stressful time in your life? Do you have, or have you had symptoms in multiple parts of your body? Is your pain inconsistent in terms of where it is, or when it appears, or how severe it is? So does it come and go? A lot of us have had that, right? We've had pain that is in different parts of the body, different times. It comes and goes. It's sometimes more severe or less. And then, do you think about pain often or all of the time? Does it worry you throughout the day? So even some things like that, we don't always have to talk directly to our brain and tell it, don't produce pain, because that's still focusing on pain. So it's sometimes about, if you do have a pain signal, calming it, but there's also like changing this preoccupation with fixing pain and starting to live your life. Okay. But we'll talk a lot more about PRT, Andrea. Oh, and that's pain reprocessing therapy. Yes. Thanks for putting that, Lola. And yeah, that's what is nice about this book. It gives you an outline of exactly what to do. Okay. We have Nova. You've had your hand up. Do you have a question or a comment?
Oh, just let me get rid of that background. Sorry, I didn't realize that was still on. There we go. Yeah, well, gosh, I had a question and now my mind is spinning because you've just said so many useful things in the last 2 minutes since I raised my hand.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely needed this book. And
good.
I've read it once very quickly, and I joined this group because I wanted to just really focus on it with other people like you're offering, which is tremendous, because I'm a bit of I sort of read very quickly and don't always take in the points, so I make myself make notes now. But the thing for me, anyway, sorry, I'm waffling. The thing for me is that I definitely have the thing where it's skipped around my body, And when
Yes.
all I wanted to say is when I'm stuck in one of those places,
Yeah.
it feels really hard for me to buy into the fact that it
Yes.
is neuroplastic
Sure.
until it moves somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then I go, well, of course it was neuroplastic. And then I become obsessed with the new area. And it's so hard for me then. And it's ridiculous because I've had 7 or 8 places now over the last few years, going for months at a time,
Yes.
some longer than others. But why can I not see it when I'm like now at the moment I have really bad neck pain, and I think there is something slightly out, but by obsessing about it every day, because it clicks and things, but by obsessing it every day, I know I'm making it worse, but I can't seem to get myself out of this place, even though I know that's what I need to do.
Yeah.
I don't know what part of the book is going to help me with knowing that thing when it moves around. That's the thing for me, you know?
Maybe there are just some little ways to talk about it differently or believe it differently. Like, I don't know what you're thinking is like clicking or what that means, but basically our nervous system can control the tightness of the muscles. So I think of any little thing like that, some little, niggling new thing. I have that in my neck a little bit. Like yesterday I was having it here and there. And so I just kind of think of like, okay, how am I stressed in my life? Like, I just react so differently when there's a pain signal that for me, it doesn't even last very long anymore. So there might be some little ways that it's almost like a predictive coding of like, okay, well, this one goes away and this one, a new one will come. It's like you're telling me the history, but there might even be a little expectation of like, okay, this new thing, well, maybe this is structural and this will last a while, but
maybe I expect it to last.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So just even getting curious about that. Yeah. I really love that tool, Detective for the Opposite. I think that's coming up in the chapters to come, but like for my neck pain, for example, like I was noticing just this little kinked feeling, and I get that from time to time. I think I have some strong neural pathways there, honestly. So when I'm stressed, that's an area that's like a chink in the armor, just an easy area for my brain to start, talking to me. So I did notice, though, I was driving with a friend and I made a similar movement and didn't have pain. So you can get really curious about when it feels better, because right now your brain may be looking for how it feels bad, and it's always bad when this flares up or whatever. Like some of the ways we even talk about it versus like this could be a really temporary thing. The brain turns on and off these neural pathways. Okay,
it's
I have
kind
this...
of where my stress shows up in my body for me at the moment, I think, because I notice when I am distracted or busy or doing something really joyful, which I'm trying to introduce more into my life, the dial definitely goes way down without me trying. And yesterday I spent the whole day going, I'm going to roll this shoulder, I'm going to loosen my neck, I'm going to put a heating pad on even though it's like 40 degrees or worse. And it's just worse. I woke up today, I spent the whole day trying to fix it. So,
that's the perfect example. Sorry you went through that, but thanks for being an example and showing that. Because that is really, when we have that preoccupation, that wanting to fix it, that focus of like, there's a problem, what are the things to do to fix it? Let me stretch it. Let me, use the heating pad, that is a fear-based response. And we want to just be like, oh, you know what? Okay, that's interesting. When I get that little neck kink, I don't think it's going to last very long. Even now that I'm talking about it, I feel like I can feel it a little bit more. So
I'm a very auto-suggestive person.
Yes, right. So
for
me, it's just more like, okay, there's a sensation, just like I might be like, oh, okay, my sock's a little bit folded, not a big deal or whatever, right? It's not a danger. It's not a real danger. I don't believe, even when people's necks make noise, most of the time that does not indicate anything pathological or anything like that there's an injury. We most of the time we'll have some little noises, and if they don't give us pain at the same time, we don't even notice them. You might.
I've had them in my ankles and I don't attach to them.
Exactly.
But you think the fear, I'm sorry, I will stop in a minute because I know you're trying to get around lots of people, but just very quickly, just while I'm on, do you think the fear can come from So anxiety in your life about other things, and then
Yes.
feeling that level of fear every day suddenly
Yes.
leads you to latch on to symptoms in your body, which is like sort of
Yes.
a health anxiety thing. I guess it grows through that.
Yeah, it can absolutely be that. And then for some people who say, well, my life is pretty, pretty relaxed. All I have is the pain. That becomes your new fear. That becomes your
Yeah.
preoccupation. In fact, one of those things that he said is, do you think about pain often or all the time? Does it worry you throughout the day? So what they've really found, and if you're in that Tell Me About Your Pain Facebook group, I have a post about pain catastrophizing, and there's actual research on the way that you react to pain and the words that you use. If you think like, I think about pain all the time and there's nothing I can do to help it, and I desperately want to get out of pain, they can actually predict that you're more likely to get a new acute pain, for your acute pain to turn chronic. And if you have a surgery, for your surgery to have more complications, just by how you rate on that pain catastrophizing scale, right? So yeah, fear is
And look that
all
up.
about decreasing
high
the
on that.
fear. And sometimes we can do that through the thought processes and through processing emotions. And sometimes we can do it just by living our lives, right? So there's like the things that decrease the pain, and then the things that increase like our life, and things that we're doing that can decrease pain too.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to go to a question here because I haven't totally read it, but I think this is going to be a helpful one. What about when radiological images show damage, as in partially torn rotator cuff and labrum tears, where they weren't there before? I never had problems sleeping until about a year ago, and then it showed up. There was damage to the shoulders that wasn't present before. Okay, so if there was damage, that's where we would say, like, has it been more than 3 to 6 months? Has it been responsive to medical treatment? If there is injury, the normal course of events is for it to heal. Like if you have a cut, you're not having to do like special meditations or anything, or any special treatments for it to heal. The body knows how to do that, and it'll start feeling better and better each day. So that's one thing that Dr. Schubiner says is, one of the signs that it's more the neuroplastic pain than acute new pain is if you're, oh wait, what was I saying? Sorry, I just got distracted. I was reading that. Anyway, so there's, I'll come back to it. Sorry, you guys. This is just like the real me, huh? Anyway, so if there, oh, okay. Here's what it was. I remember now. When you do have damage, it will start to feel better day by day, right? So if like you're 3, 5, 7 days in, it should be like on the mend, right? So most people, myself as a physical therapist, would think, oh, if it's not getting better, it's because it's not healing. But what we presume, and they've really shown through research and this practice, is that injuries heal. Assume that injuries heal. If it's not getting better within 3 to 6 months and it's resistant to medical treatment, then likely it's neuroplastic. So hopefully that helps. If you're in that 3 to 6 month period, that might be a little harder to convince yourself. But here's the thing. Pain-free people have some of these symptoms. As Alan Gordon said in the book, he has a partial rotator cuff tear. And here's the thing. We don't ever really study people when they're pain-free to know when these tears happen. But they did one study that I found that studied young athletes that were pain-free. So these are people at their peak performance, and they're young and they're pain-free. 89% of them had a hip labral tear. So, I don't know when that happened. That could have been like within that year or whatever. But again, we're not usually studying pain-free people. And so that's why when we do see something like a tear, we assume that's what the pain is from. But these young athletes were playing and doing fine with a hip labral tear and had no idea about it. So I don't know. It just, it helps to question these types of things. And for you, again, just be a detective for the opposite as much as you can, because then you can be your own proof, right? You can like wonder and speculate and guess and fear. But when you have that conversation with a friend and you're happy, and then you notice, oh, my shoulder doesn't hurt, like you just be that detective for the opposite. And then, you can prove to yourself that it's neuroplastic, if it is, which I'm guessing it is if you're here. Okay. And then with sleeping, problem sleeping, definitely you could do that graded exposure, even imagining yourself in those sleeping positions. It's weird how much graded exposure can help, but visualizing with a powerful emotion is so, so helpful. So if you're wondering what graded exposure is, they talk about it later in the book. And if you're in the Tell Me About Your Pain Facebook group, just look that up. And I've done a workshop on it and there's resources on it. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I was just kind of looking through the chat. Oh, and Diane, it's been there more than a year. Can a rotator cuff heal on its own though? Yeah. I mean, so here's the thing. It might still look like there's a tear, like if they do an MRI, but it doesn't have to cause pain for more than 3 to 6 months. Does that make sense? Yes, things heal on their own. And if it is, again, if it's found in pain-free people, then we know that those structures are not what is causing pain. So it's like a whole different mentality, but it is what they're finding is actually true with neuroscience. Okay, let me make sure I'm getting through. I love all these questions and I want to just answer all of them and talk to you guys and hear what you're talking about, but I just want to make sure we get through. There's a little bit from chapter 2 that I wanted to talk about. Basically, pain is a danger signal. We've talked about that. So there was this construction worker that jumped down and a nail went through his boot, and he had to be sedated because he had so much pain as they rushed him to the hospital, and they cut off his boot and found that there was not even a scratch, not even a trace of blood. So basically he was receiving signals of, there's a sock, there's a foot, there's this like nail that's between the toes, but then his brain, because he looked at what was going on, created that severe, severe pain. And the danger signal was saying, like, don't keep walking around, like, get this treated right now. This is very dangerous. And so the brain produced pain. But a lot of times now, what we're seeing, if we have chronic pain, if we have neuroplastic pain, is that we're considering all of these things dangerous. And that's why the brain is producing pain, oh, it hurts when I sleep. And then we start going to bed that night and we, prepare for it and we tighten up and we create that pain from predictive coding. So one way that you can really see what's going on for your brain is even to just imagine yourself doing that exercise or position when you're in, kind of a relaxed state. Just imagine it and see if any parts of your body respond. And that's a good way to know it's neuroplastic. We haven't really talked about foods much, but for me, that was my main thing, ulcerative colitis and IBS. And so when I would think about coffee and my stomach hurt, then that's this aha moment for me that I was like, oh my gosh, if I can have that pain recreated just by thinking about it, then obviously that's neuroplastic. Okay. Yeah. And so Lola was asking about somatic tracking and what else can you do? And then Shawnee says avoidance behaviors. So that's really good. And then the other thing I would add, besides somatic tracking, if you're aware of pain, and if you're really in it, sometimes it's hard to go into the somatic tracking and go into the pain. So they say leaning into positive sensations. So find some place in your body that feels good or that feels relaxed and that you can focus on, that can help. But yeah, the leaning into positive sensation or then just pure avoidance behaviors, which is distracting. Some of us are really I was gonna say avoidant. We're avoidant to avoidance behaviors because the sound of it sounds like we're not doing it right. Like you're gonna relax and not do something to try to fix it. But again, that energy of like, let me fix the pain by doing this complicated, 3-hour process, like that's stressful to us. Where most of the time what we need is to do less. And avoidance behaviors could be like, going on a walk or doing a puzzle or petting your dog or going for a drive or anything that's relaxing to you. And that is part of pain reprocessing. You're allowed to do it. A lot of us are perfectionists, but it's not about doing more. It's about feeling that safety and not feeling that fear. When I exercise, I don't consciously anticipate pain, but I get delayed onset pain. Yeah. Any suggestions? Yeah. I've actually noticed with myself, because I'm always just like, I don't have chronic pain anymore. So I'm always just really observant. And when I would expect to have pain, I would have more pain. So I noticed that sometimes I would be doing an exercise and I would think to myself, like, oh, I bet I'll feel this later. I would think it, like I caught myself many times thinking that. So now when I hear myself think that, I will just think something like, maybe I won't get sore this time. And even just opening that door just a crack, I get sore way less. And I'm talking about just the delayed onset muscle soreness. I even think that can be amplified by our sweet nervous system trying to protect us. So if you are, depending on what level of pain you're getting, you might want to try graded exposure, or you might want to maybe do something that's less triggering. If you're like, okay, well, my exercise routine is this 1 hour of yoga, maybe something sounds a little easier to you to start. And that's part of graded exposure as well. Okay, let's go to Kathleen.
Go. Okay. Hi. I wanted to respond to the lady who talked first, the one who said she gets so upset with herself and angry with herself because she is in this pain and she can't get away from it. One of the podcasts that Alan did, he was talking to this woman who had pain. And of course, we believe that the pain, the brain sends the pain signals because it thinks we are in danger and it wants to keep us safe. And so this woman had this pain, and he said, well, how do you treat her when she's afraid like that? And she said, I just get really upset. And he said, you have 2 girls, and when they're upset, do you get angry at them? Do you get mad at them? What do you do when they're afraid? And she said, well, I pick them up and I hug them and I soothe them. Mm-hmm. He said, that's what you need to do for yourself. Yeah. You need to speak to your brain and yourself as a child or whatever it is you feel, and you just reassure yourself, mm-hmm. You're going to get through this. We're safe. We're fine. We're in a good place here. And you keep repeating that until your brain can get the message, because it's just gone a little haywire. Yeah. I read this book a few months ago. It was actually recommended by my physical therapist. And I thought I could be the poster child for this whole thing. It really resonated with me. And I'm a medical person, and I've always believed in medicine. And I took a whole new path because after 3 years of tests and procedures and all this, I was nowhere. And it's been a great journey. But there's a lot of these things about taking care of yourself and appreciating yourself and loving yourself and giving yourself a lot of reassurance. That's it.
Yes. That is so true, because so much of the time we're resisting the emotions instead of just accepting that they're there and understanding, like, yeah, of course I have some grief about this and it makes sense. And how could I, if I was, like if there was a child in front of me having that same emotion, how would I treat them? I wouldn't be like, oh, you're so stupid. You'd be like, oh, sweetie, come here. Let me help you. Let me take care of you. You're safe. You're going to be okay. And that is more you know, the emotion that will help with healing. It's getting to that calmer state. Things are going to be okay. Yeah. So I love that. Yeah, definitely seeing all of these emotions. I actually wanted to comment one more thing about that first question with the grief, because that reminded me of when I was in Dr. Schubner's training. He was working with someone who was doing some somatic tracking and became pain-free. And she just for a very short time was like, wow, this is amazing. And then almost immediately went into grief. So she started feeling really bad and sad that she didn't know about this earlier and all the years she's wasted. And so just know that some of this is you're used to feeling a certain like level of misery, you could say, right? Like your nervous system's kind of used to being unhappy in this way, right? When you have the pain. And then when that can start to go away, you can have these other emotions come up to kind of keep you low like that, right? The grief and this is normal. I'm not saying like low, like this shouldn't happen, but just realize what we want to do is build that tolerance of like, it's okay to feel good. And this is good that I feel good. And what else can I do that feels good? And what else do I like to do? And, you know, so basically that's the parasympathetic calm state of the nervous system. We want to get to that more and more and be okay being there, right? Like, and that's the state where you're not in fear. The other states are fear-based, and this is, you know, things are going to be okay. Rest and repair state of the body. The muscle tone becomes normal. Things relax. Your body knows how to heal. Oh yeah, and pain times resistance is equals suffering. Yes, exactly. If you have pain and then you have a lot of resistance to it, you'll have a lot of suffering. But if you have pain or an emotion like grief or an annoying person or whatever, and then times zero, anything times zero is zero. So there would be zero suffering. You would just have, you know, still that stimuli, but no suffering about it. Easier said than done, right? When we have pain, but it's a process of becoming more and more neutral, and it's just rewiring that brain day by day. So to clarify, processing strong emotions is also part of PRT. Let's see. Yes. And I'm just thinking of how like Dr. Schubner gets a lot more into processing emotions, especially processing anger in his book, Unlearn Your Pain. I wouldn't say that in The Way Out, that's like a huge focus, but definitely that is, you know, that is part of decreasing your fear-based response, because any of those emotions that are like distress or anger or frustration or anxiousness, those are all fear-based emotions. And then, yeah. So stored unprocessed emotions create fear, which create pain as a defense. Yeah. And that's where it gets tricky. Like he doesn't really talk about stored emotions or unprocessed emotions so much, does he? I don't think so. He keeps it a little cleaner with, you know, the scientific terms, but definitely we know since pain and emotions are processed in the same place in the brain, and they react the same when we process them. Basically, somatic tracking you can do for the emotion of grief. Oh, it feels heavy. It feels like a gray cloud. It feels dense. And you can do that for the emotion of grief, and you can move through it, because we only keep those emotions alive because of the stories that we're telling. But when we actually go into the sensation, we can process an emotion somatically within 90 seconds. So yes. Okay. We have a question from a Zoom user. If you know who you are, you have your hand raised.
Hi, is it me,
Hi.
Sinead? Can you hear me?
It just says Zoom user, but you're
Oh,
on. You're talking.
sorry.
So it is you,
Hi.
Sinead. Hey, no, that's
Hi.
okay.
How are
Hi.
you? I just want to say thank you for doing this, and I follow you on social media, and I find you're very clear and concise, and I relate to you because you are a physical therapist, and I'm a physiotherapist, and I work in Ireland, and I'm a physio for 25 years treating musculoskeletal pains. And I suppose I just have, I could ask you 100 questions, but I'm trying to narrow this down. So I was lucky enough to do my master's in Australia 20 years ago, and I got a lot of education on pain science from, in our field, like Lorimer Mosley and David
Wow.
Butler.
Yeah.
So they actually
Cool.
taught, we had modules from them. But so
Nice.
I always carried that through my work. And one of the things I'd like to say as a kind of a statement is, even 20 years later, it's not mainstream. So it's really, and I work in the public sector. I've also worked in the private sector. And I've always tried to, do pain education with my patients, like since I did that master's. But I found a lot of resistance to it. Okay.
Yeah.
And as well, and for me personally now, I'm the patient. So 25 years in, I've been very, very active. I was a triathlete, and I had tons of injuries, and they all got better, right? In the designated healing period, right? So, but I've had back pain and, nerve pain down my leg, to keep it simple. And about a year and a half ago, I injured it again, and this time it didn't get better. And I ended up a year later, which is almost against my core belief, having surgery. I ended up having surgery, and it's been worse since that. And done a lot. Now, I've probably done a lot more rereading the books and all of that. And because I felt like it's one thing, it being in your intellectual brain, as opposed to embodying all this. So I'm really, really trying to embody it as me as a patient now, but it's really hard. And this is coming to a question. It's hard to say everything in a short space of time, but like one of the things we really learned was like the nitty gritty pain pathways, and even in the spinal cord, and how there's changes within the dorsal horn and all these things. And what they taught us way back then is, look, you can either influence this from a bottom-up approach or a top-down, and you can do both.
Yeah.
And anything that basically relaxes the nervous system, gives positive safety messages, all of those things. Now, those guys weren't big on the emotions. They did mention them, but they felt like, oh, if you need to go to therapy and do that too, and it's and it's trying to get it all together. But my question that I find hard for me sometimes is like, I'm doing all the things, and you don't sometimes have this really clear reaction to it. You do, you process the anger, or I love all your stuff like Detect for the Opposite. You're doing all these things, and you don't have this like immediate response in your body sometimes. And that's the hard bit. And what I keep going back to, unfortunately, as a physio, because we're so analytical, is like, I'm thinking, but is there something in my dorsal horn? There's neurons that changed, and how the hell do I access those guys? You know what I mean? It's like, it's so complicated. Like there's all these areas in the brain that influence our pain, which is a good thing in a way, because we have all these ways in to actually reduce our pain. But sometimes I feel like so much of pain is subconscious, and so much of emotions are subconscious. And how do we access through the cognitive brain? Because a lot of pain reprocessing is through cognition. And that's what I loved about physio, because you could access it through the body. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I think so. Like,
it's a bit complicated.
Like basically, like we can
and we called it central.
Ways. Oh, go ahead.
No, back then, like you said, we called it central sensitization. But a big emphasis was on the dorsal horn, the spinal cord, and the all the areas in the brain as well. And it's like these terms, pain reprocessing therapy, and all the other terms are more kind of through the mind-body approach. But it's like, I suppose, it's a comment that we are taught this in physio, but it's like, it's not practiced a lot. And that's frustrating as a physio. But now as me as a patient, I find I'm trying to unlearn some of, you're always unlearning the medical model. Because I do believe, I used to say this thing to patient, look, it's not, imagine yourself as a house, and they come to you and they think, oh, I need to get a bricklayer in here. I need to do something with the bricks, or I need a plumber, or I need this. And I always used to say, look, it's the electrician you need. It's the pathways, whether it's,
Mm,
you know, in the spinal cord, the brain.
yeah.
But it's, for me as a physio, I'm really frustrated that I can't get there quicker. And I know that's the urgency, but
Mm.
it's like, what are your thoughts about, I guess, central sensitization in the spinal cord, and trying to, can we truly access those abnormal pathways that are so ingrained and so deeper? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Well, I think just like everything, they've shown that with chronic pain, there are those changes
Yeah.
and they can be reprocessed. And it's not like they're having to, none of PRT is like, talk to your anterior cingulate cortex right now,
Yeah.
or like access the dorsal horn. It's more like you get to those states of safety in the nervous system, and you don't have to like work on rewiring specific things, just like you don't have to meditate on how to heal your cut. Like your body heals itself when you're not bugging it and when you don't, mess with it.
Yeah.
And so you don't, I think your brain is latched onto that dorsal horn because that sounds maybe like harder to access and harder to change, but really, the doing PRT will change all of that, right? Like the change is
Yeah.
because of a miscommunication of the pain pathways. And when you keep showing your brain it's not a problem and it's not important and there's less preoccupation with it, it will produce it less and less. And those structures actually look different. And probably there isn't a lot of research on the changes, fMRI changes of the dorsal horn. And maybe that's why
Yeah.
your brain has latched onto that, because you're like, okay, well, I get that there's studies on this and they've proven this, but what about this part they taught me in physical therapy school? And
Yeah.
that's part of the spinal cord for people who are listening and don't know what we're talking about. But this is what our
Yeah.
brains do. This is just a good example of how, we can, we want to look for something that's exactly like our case. And when we can't find it, well, I'm,
Yeah.
the special snowflake that this doesn't apply to. And then it can be hard because even then you find someone and you're like, well, that one was, they didn't have trauma and I did, or whatever, right? Like, we'll just like, this is what the brain wants to do, is like find these little things to just kind of latch onto and say like, this might be dangerous. So just notice, how that's feeling when you're feeling,
Yeah.
talking about that dorsal horn, and how you're feeling when you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about PRT, and you're, like we are all vibrating. We all go up and down like this. We're all in this wave like state of life. Sometimes we have some good times and then we start, like having some yucky times, but then we have good times again. But when we're in those lower times, it's hard to remember that we've ever had good times. So you could, have that journal. Maybe over the past year, there have been some fluctuations, or maybe, you know what I mean? But when you're talking to me today, if you're in one of those lower states, you can feel like, no, it's constant. It's always been there. It never changes. So just be, like I said, your own detective for the opposite. And you guys literally, I think of a detective from the movies that has their little notepad in their pocket and they're always pulling it out. And they're like, there's a crumb, over by the windowsill, like that's what you're, because you want to prove to your brain that it's not dangerous. And if there are ever any times that you're feeling pretty darn good and you have that same structure in your body, then the structure's not creating it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose just one thing that I would say to others that are listening, it's like, when we were taught about pain, we were taught all pain is in the brain, even acute pain, like any of those signals don't get, and it's almost got a bad name. Like if you say it's in your brain, but every single thing in our body is processed in the brain.
Yeah.
So that's completely normal, even in acute pain.
Yeah.
Like every single thing doesn't become pain until it travels through your cord, through your brain, and you give it meaning. And I love this book, and I think it was Schubiner recommended, was How Emotions Are Processed. And it was amazing. I don't know. And he talked about like if you could go back in time and remember the first time you felt anger, like a little electrical current went through your brain, and then eventually you formed an angry circuit. And it had a million things going through it. So
Yeah.
it's like, you know, and if you've had like a big upheaval in your life, the same time you hurt your back,
Yeah.
those things are wired together then. And once
Yeah.
you stimulate one, you stimulate the other. And I love that.
Absolutely.
You know, you've all these circuits, and in a
Yes.
way it's a good thing. It's complicated, but it also means you have all these ways in of trying
Yes.
to solve it. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now.
Exact-
Thank you so
No, I
much.
love it. Oh, no problem. I know we're at time. I do want to just get to this one question because this is my take on it. What place does PT have when dealing with chronic pain? Does having therapy just instill the fact that something's wrong and needs to be fixed? It definitely can. So I don't want to make a blanket statement like you should always quit physical therapy when you start PRT, but because there are some physical therapists that understand the mind-body approach, but definitely depending on who you see, they may be reinforcing, hey, the reason you have pain is because, you know, your SI joint gets locked up. And what we want to see is when I get really stressed, my nervous system causes my SI joint to lock up, right? Like we're not treating the asymmetry and then just like stretching it out, and because it'll keep happening if our nervous system is causing it. So yeah, I think PT, on the other hand, though, I have had some people really feel calmer when they go to PT because then they have, like, they're doing exercises, they feel like they have a plan, they have the belief that it works for them. And so they find it more helpful than quitting. So it's really just feel it out for you. And if there's a net negative feeling of fear, it's not going to help you, even if you're doing all the right exercises, quote unquote. But if there is a net feeling of calm, and I've had some people do this with chiropractors and stuff like that too, a net feeling of like, I'm safe in my body feels good when I move it. You know, I'm progressing my exercises in this safe way. This feels really nice. Like that could be really beneficial. Okay. All right, you guys, this was so good. Next week, we're going to do chapters 3 and 4, get more into it. And, you know, I'll try to just basically get some highlights for us. And then I liked how we were able to discuss some things and have some questions and comments. So I think we can do that in the future as well. Remember, if you're in that Tell Me About Your Pain Facebook group, that you're always welcome to ask questions there. And, you know, if you have questions about what we talked about here, just like tag me and we can keep the conversation going there. And yes, the recording will be posted on the Facebook page, and maybe I can even pin it to the featured section at the top if you guys want to be able to find the replay. Thanks for all of you who joined and participated. And it was really fun to get to speak to some of you and see some of your comments and questions. And I'm just glad that we have this resource and all of this research being done for us, because this is really, as it says, revolutionary and changing a lot of lives. And I hope that you're finding some help from it too. All right, you guys, have a great rest of your day. Bye.